Hey everyone. So I want to talk about three things here. Talking about starting fresh, and we'll explore letting go, reconnecting, and looking forward. This is the theme of this weekend's online mindfulness retreat. Starting fresh, letting go, reconnecting, looking forward. So I just want to speak to what we're going to be exploring here. It's good to see all of you on live. If you're watching the recording of this, just stick around. We'll get into the content in a moment. So the topic for this retreat has just felt relevant to a lot of what people are going through and what I see working intimately with a lot of different people. This is a lot that people are carrying, and a feeling of stagnancy and just wanting, seems like a shedding of what is no longer serving us and stepping into a new energy. Maybe you've experienced this in your own life, just this feeling of like, kind of done with what's been happening and I want something fresh. I want newness. I feel that there's like new life in me and I want to get rid of this old snake skin and just, like the freshness of snake skin after it sheds its fur. It's like you could feel and sense the aliveness there. It's what I'm seeing for a lot of people, and I've noticed it for myself. So the retreat is going to be oriented around these three themes, and I'd like to speak to each one here just a bit. The first one being letting go. This is a lot of people speak about letting go, and a lot of us are often looking for some form of letting go, but I think we can get really off track with how that happens. The issue, like the paradoxical, the semantic paradox of letting go, right? It implies that we need to push away from something. So it actually already creates an oppositional relationship to an experience that's here, right? Which is in some sense already an issue when it comes to leading a full life. If we have any sense of what is present and then like fighting, resisting it, we're already reinforcing this loop of being at war with ourselves. Doesn't mean that I'm saying we should want it to be here and we want it to stay here. Like there's good reason to want to shift and change what we're experiencing internally. But the mechanism of working with it, since it is already an aspect of your experience, and any pattern that is arising has some positive intention, if we take the perspective of bad, go away as like the default response, we're setting ourselves up for some struggle. Not just an internal war, but actually not being able to let go of the thing that we're trying to release. Because often, or what is the case, like a fundamental truth is that if we're holding on to something, if it's still here and we're still running loops with it as a pattern, as an emotional pattern, as a behavior, it means there's some part of us that is still attached to it, that it is still gaining some benefit from it. The positive intention of holding on is the thing that often gets overlooked in the conversation of letting go. And the system and that part is not going to release whatever it is you're holding on to until it sees that you have the resources to navigate and be with a life without that holding on. Even if it is just the identity of being someone that is in control, that doesn't move on. I mean, think of potentially just being wronged by someone in the past and you're still ruminating about it and holding the grudge, and you say like, oh, I should get over this. But there's another part of you, it's like, I don't want to be the kind of person that just gets over this. Let this person get away with it. No, I need to hold my fury and my anger and my hatred, right? So it's in some sense like killing us inside. We feel the suffering from it. But the secondary gain of it is that we have the identity of of being the person that doesn't let this person get off the hook. In this case, the whole irony of that is like they might be doing their life, and the wrong that they caused you in that moment is still continuing well beyond the initial pain that was inflicted. So it's an example of how a part of us might be pressing on the gas to release something, and another part of us is pressing on the brake. And if we don't have an honest conversation with that part that is pressing on the brake, it's not going to lift up. It's just going to stay there and keep holding us on to this very thing that we're condemning. And this is why people go in cycles for years and years and years, feeling like this push-pull, push-pull. It's like, want this, but stay here. And so the first big part of what we're going to be exploring in this retreat is just, where do those snags come up for you in the letting go process? What subconsciously is grasping and holding on? Even though you might be saying very consciously that I'm ready. I want to let go. I want to release. So the interesting thing that happens here is sometimes we get closer to the part of us that's holding on, and we're like, oh, it's actually not time to let go yet. I still have to like run what we could say is like the karmic trajectory of holding on. Like I really need to see all aspects of that pattern. And you learn so much about yourself when you actually allow yourself to go through patterns, including patterns of grasping onto something that you don't like. You get to see all the ins and outs and the intricacies of why you're holding on, and aspects of your psyche that are causing that, and the complicated emotions and how it's maybe related to your parents or other things. Like it gets deep and rich, and you only get that opportunity if you choose to show up and look intimately. If you want to just take the perspective of that's bad, push it away, move on. In my experience and my perspective, it's a deeply lost opportunity. Not only does it mostly not work, it's just a lost opportunity to really learn about yourself so that you can fully release and then step into the next chapter of your life without the residue of that thing. Because you might put a Band-Aid on it and say, oh, I'm not thinking about this, and then you just focus positive on the things you want to create. But whatever it was that was creating that pattern in the first place, causing you to hold on, I guarantee that's going to show up in some other relationship or some other setting or your next job or your next workplace or the next community you're with. This stuff is deep, and it requires descending into it to really understand what's going on. And only when you descend, you touch, you meet with compassion, you reinforce a sense of safety on the deepest level in you, does the system actually go, oh, it is okay to release this. I have patterns that I spent years just running through, but I did it with like a ton of love and space. I wasn't suffering deeply from it. Just like, whoa, here it is again. Doesn't seem like it's ready to let go. Let's see how this one plays out. But each time I went through that, something softened and softened and softened. And then when it often isn't this like big aha, like, oh, now I release, done. It's just like you wake up one day and that urge to do that thing is not there, or the rumination about that person is no longer happening, and there's just an inner spaciousness because you did the work. You let that play out. You gave it presence. You allowed it to unhook on the deepest level. That's what I'm interested in the conversation of letting go. So I don't have any grand delusions that, we're going to come into this retreat and then, you just let go of all your stuff. Great. Like, I don't know anywhere that actually happens. But what I am very committed to us exploring, and what I can almost guarantee you'll get to touch if you attend, is really starting to see clearly what it is that is reinforcing the patterns of holding on, and what a pathway to releasing, letting go, to releasing looks like. Sometimes that can be very quick. There's certain things we just need to see, touch, and then they release. Other ones are deeper. And some of them are like lifetime karmic patterns, you could say. And those ones are especially rich. So that's letting go. Reconnecting, right? The next theme. And even though I've spaced them out as like letting go, reconnecting, looking forward, like a lot of this stuff happens together, like all rolled up in the same thing, but we are going to be breaking the retreat down into those 3 categories. So reconnecting, what does that look like? Well, a big thing, if you're following me here in my social media, you've seen me talking about all the different ways that we actually lose ourselves in the noise of life. The literal noise of like the busyness around us and lots of stimulation coming in, the media, other people's ideas, like that. I don't know a human who is like above being impacted by that. Like we're social creatures. We're wired to be attuned to what's happening around us. And we're wired to also like take it seriously and to really wonder like, oh, does this person's perspective of me, like, is there merit to this? And if you're like me, I always, I'll tell you a quick story. I always thought of myself as a really good student. I still think I'm a good student. In the sense of like, I was very open to other people's perspectives of what should be done or can be done. And especially if I'm learning something new. I was really into golf when I was in high school. I went through, it was either 11 or 12 different golf coaches over the course of 5 years. That's nuts. Most people find like 1 or 2 or one that they stay with for a long time. Why was that? Well, it's like every time I was on the range practicing, someone would come up, a different pro, they saw that I had some talent, a little bit, and they would give me a tip, and I'd be like, ooh, that makes sense, maybe they know something that I don't, and then I would like go from one coach to another, each time thinking like, oh, this person, like their wisdom is something that I need to glean, and I always like just put it in to the category of like, I'm open-minded, like I'm here to learn. What I'm realizing, like I've realized in recent years, a lot of it has been doubting, like my own inner compass. It's like, I actually don't know, like, where am I in all of that? How can I locate myself, my inner wisdom, instead of outsourcing that to another person? It's been a big recognition for me. I don't know if it resonates for you, but this is one of those examples where, something that, that's actually potentially getting in the way of our fulfillment and deep alignment and expression, that pattern is masked as a virtue. And in this case, it was the virtue of I'm a good student. But really what was going on is like, I actually don't know if I trust myself. That's a big one to breathe into. And so I think this happens in different ways. Obviously it's great to take in feedback from other people. So I'm not saying don't have mentors. But like sometimes that pattern can actually work against us. And I think for many of us, there's so much coming in that it just gets really hard to locate ourselves in it. What is my wisdom versus someone else's opinions? What is my inner truth versus, the trauma fear that is arising? Who am I when I'm actually not caught up in the next to-do or agenda item or goal that I am ruthlessly working to get toward, with this idea that once I do, it's going to give me my permanent refuge? Goals are exciting. I love them. I have a lot of future visions for myself. It's actually like a big part of how I feel thrill and energy in my life. And I am always checking myself to make sure that I am not mistaking any attainment of some future moment as the thing that is going to actually help me find myself or be my refuge. It doesn't work like that. It's always right now. Like, can I connect on the deepest level to what is arising as true in me now? And you condition that now moment by moment by moment and get stronger and stronger and stronger. And then your life can be led by a place of deep alignment rather than by psychological noise or emotional fear or past patterns that are keeping you safe potentially and maybe giving you a decent life. I'm not saying that this stuff leads to terrible lives, but what it does happen is it slowly chips away at our self-trust, and we ultimately end up making decisions that are just like slightly outside of alignment with the deepest sense of who we know ourselves to be. And from the spiritual perspective, I'll just say it outright, I don't actually know what a more worthwhile journey is in this lifetime than being ruthlessly committed to listening on the deepest level for what is most true in your particular karmic path, your dharmic path, what you've been brought into this earth, this human realm, to uncover, to be like the expression of you, right? Like you could put the spiritual stuff aside. It's just like there is a fundamental expression of you. Don't you want to know what that is? Isn't that like, can you think of anything more fundamental than that? The opposite is betrayal. And you can say things, well, it should be more about taking care of other people and this and helping other people live their life. How are you going to help other people live their fullest lives if you haven't actually done the work of knowing what that actually looks like? So this is big. This is important to me. And I think that that second stage is what we're going to dive into, the process of like reconnection. What does that look like? So that feels really meaningful, and I'm excited to dive in there. It gets rich, it gets tricky, it gets messy, it's complicated, but it's actually incredibly simple once you are attuned to like the pulse of truth that we're talking about attuning to. And then the next thing is envisioning, aka manifesting, looking forward. Manifesting is a complicated word, and I don't refer to it in the more colloquial way or the more mainstream way of just, that's what I want. Think positively about it and get it. I don't think that many people are talking about manifestation that way, but I think that's like the caricature version of it. So I think what is true is that we are manifesting in each moment. We are creating our reality based on how we're showing up in this moment. That does condition what happens in the next moment. The idea that you just need to have positive thoughts to get that is bullshit. Because how things actually get created and inspired from your being is so much deeper than just like a momentary mental storyline of like, I want this or I should do this. Right? You can want something, but something deep in your system is unresolved to having it. And that kind of going back to our first point of like with letting go, we often say we want that, but in other parts, just like pressing the brakes. The same with manifesting. Like, it's great. Like, and some, I've said this before, like positive thoughts. I think there are certain settings and situations in life where we actually just need to flood the mind with what we want and like convincing ourselves that we can have it to get ourselves out of a negative situation. I think of the documentary series, the Netflix series Made. I don't know if anyone watched that, but this woman who was just in deep poverty and an abusive relationship, and just no resources. And it's just like sometimes in those moments, right? Like opening up to the fullness of our trauma might just be a lot. Like we might end up swimming in it. And so to like break out of that so that we can actually have some space to feel, like sometimes requires going like, no, my life can look like this. It can look like this. It can look like this. And you just become so single-mindedly focused on that so that it drowns out any sort of doubt until you break through it. I think there are scenarios where that is actually an effective strategy. And, anyone who's gotten out of a dire situation most likely has experienced the truth of that to some degree. So I'm not dismissing that entirely. What I am more poking at is using that as the thing that is going to ultimately create our life, like in like a full aligned way, is definitely limited. Even in those experiences where we use the mind in that way to break us out of something, it's like it breaks us out of something so that we can actually have more space to do the real work of figuring out who am I and what comes, like what is next for me. But it's not that strategy that then takes you, all the way to the deepest inner peace and fulfillment. It's used temporarily. So, what I am interested in for this, like letting go, the looking forward and envisioning stage is, for you to actually get quiet enough to hear, like, what is the inspiration that's moving through you? What wants to be created in terms of a project, a relationship, or your life in general, right? I've talked about this before, like as it relates to intuitive guidance. There's no need to poo-poo things, like wanting things or people or a certain setting. I think sometimes in like the spiritual space, when we're talking about inner freedom, there's like a condemning of that and saying like that's not the real thing. Well, in this human realm, it is the real thing. I mean, your life in each moment involves something that's around you, people that are around you, a job that you're engaging in. And so the actual manifestation of those things, like, is an expression of, or can be an expression of like internal movement, the expression of ourselves internally. Like it impacts and shifts what's happening around us. And when we allow, like if you drop into a space of just feeling really spacious and free and grounded and open and like open to receiving, like, okay, what is next in my life? It's not like your body's just going to dissolve and now you're in a space of consciousness and emptiness and there's nothing there. You're still in the world. You're still in the world. So that has to express itself through you and create something through you. And so what that creation might be is just like, whoa, I'm like really interested in a beautiful relationship. And this is like how I see it coming up in my mind. Or like, I have this feeling of like where I'm at right now, it just feels confined. So I'm just envisioning like being on a plot of like several acres of land and a small house. And it's just like, there's something about that feels really good. That's not grasping. That's like letting the expression of freedom and letting the expression of you arise and present itself of like, this is what alignment with the external world would look like from that space. And so that's what I'm interested in for you in this retreat when it comes to looking at the looking forward of just like when you give yourself that space to envision, to create, to actually be still and notice what arises, like what does come up and how does it feel when it's coming from the depth of you rather than just your ideas of this is what I read in a manifestation book, or this is what I see my peers doing, or this is the pressure I feel like I need to do because, you know, there's so much FOMO around. Like all of that can create some like agitated excitement for sure. But if it's not coming from deep alignment, it's often going to manifest itself as like anxiety over time and like an incompleteness. It's just like there's an emptiness that is at the base of it, even though there's maybe like an excitement of like, ooh, I'm creating. So at least when it comes to my teachings, what I want for myself and what I teach is just making sure like as we are moving forward into that creation, we are bringing the fullness of ourselves there, bringing the fullness of ourselves with us. So that's a quick overview of what this is going to entail. As some of you know, it's like it's a Friday night. These retreats are Friday night through Sunday afternoon. So this one starts this weekend, January 21st. You do not need to attend live. I get a lot of questions about this. If you want to get the retreat, like you're interested in this content and you want to go into it, but you don't have time this weekend, that's okay. Many people will listen to it weeks later or months later when they have time, or in bits, like I'm going to listen to one piece this week and then another piece next week. That is absolutely fine. I'd say it's at least 50% of people that engage with the retreat in that way. So don't feel pressured to have to attend live. And some people just prefer going through the recording. It's just like, okay, I do this at my own time in a way that feels right. So if you want to just add this to your learning library, just make sure you register beforehand because the registration isn't available afterwards. So that is the one key thing to know about it. All the details are at the link in the comments here, also at the link in my bio. And listen, if you want to attend, if you're really interested in this, but it's not possible financially, we do have partial scholarships available for those who just wouldn't otherwise be able to attend. That is different than not being willing to invest in your own growth. But I know sometimes circumstances are difficult. So reach out at Corey@limindfulness.com to inquire about partial scholarships. We'll find a way to make it happen for you. Yeah, check out the link. You can read all about the retreat, especially all the bonus resources that are included, like the anxiety coaching series, the deep sleep coaching series, a talk on deep rest, 3 stages of relaxation. There's a lot of supplemental stuff that you get to continue with the journey in addition to roughly 12 hours worth of teaching over the retreat weekend. So I love these retreats. It's one of my most favorite things to do. And I would love to have you there, especially if this is, your first time. Well, if you've been there before, I'd love to just see you again. But if it's your first time, if you're really thinking about a retreat, then let's do it. Let's make it happen. And it would be great to work with you more closely. So thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in. Lots of love to you all, and hope to see you either live this weekend or on the recording. Until we talk again, take care.